Hi everyone, Heather here, and today I am back with another video about Mars in all 12 signs. And so talking about Mars, Mars represents a lot of different things in the birth chart. It is one of the personal planets, and it represents the way that we act out in the world. So it represents our willpower, the way we take action, what motivates us to act. It also represents our expression of anger or lack thereof if it's blocked. Another thing that it represents is our sexual expression and what we desire sort of in the bedroom. And so, Mars, because it rules sort of the masculine principle in astrology, the active sort of engaging principle, it does represent a lot of different things. And so the main thing that it represents is our expression through behavior, right? And so if we go back to the last couple of videos I did on Mercury and on Venus, they represent other forms of expression. These like very close personal planets represent the way that we express ourselves out in the world, the way that we interact and engage with the world. And so they play a big role in our day-to-day lives. So Mercury would be like our expression through language, right? And then Venus is our expression through love, through affection, through appreciation, through interaction with the other. And Mars is our expression through acts of will. And so, yeah, I'm going to be going through all 12 signs and just speaking a little bit about what Mars represents. I'm going to try to keep it concise and sort of to the point. But yeah, so let's get started with this one. So Mars and Aries. Mars in Aries is an interesting one because Mars is at home in Aries because Mars rules Aries, right? And so a lot of times people think when planets are at home in their sign that this makes this planet easier in some way in terms of its expression. And to a certain extent it does because it's a perfect match for that energy. But a lot of times what I've noticed is it just brings more of that energy, right? And so I can attest to this because I have my Mars in Aries, that Mars in Aries is very, very willful. It's almost too much will. It wants what it wants when it wants it, right? So people who have Mars in Aries, they want whatever they want and they want it now, they want it their way. And, it's pure willpower incarnate. And Mars and Aries people are really great at beginnings. They're great at initiating action. They're great at getting things started. But there's a difficulty in the follow through because Mars and Aries people, what drives them to take action is passion and is excitement for something new, right? Embarking on a new journey. And so once that journey is no longer new, it's no longer fresh, that excitement and that passion starts to wane, Mars and Aries people can sort of lose interest and their projects and the things that they sort of initiated can start to fizzle out. Another thing too, kind of going back to the nature of Mars and Aries and how it sort of wants what it wants, at that moment, in that moment, they can become very frustrated and impatient with others, especially if they don't take action in the way that they want it to happen and exactly when and in the time frame. They're not very patient with others. And so, my husband can attest to that with me. If he doesn't do something that, I want him to do in that exact moment, I'm just going to go and do it myself. And that's very much a Mars and Aries thing. They don't trust others to do things in the right way or in the right timing. If they're too slow, Mars and Aries is going to take the initiative to just go ahead and do it themselves. And so they can be sort of impatient in that way. And when things don't go their way, when they don't get what they want, and if it doesn't happen in the time frame that they have decided that it needs to happen in, Mars and Aries people can become quite frustrated and quite angry, right? And so, that is what sort of angers them. They're very direct in expressing their anger usually, unless Mars is afflicted by other planets, like maybe a square from Neptune or, something else, like maybe a square from Pluto even, which would make them sort of be more inclined to separate themselves from the situation instead of expressing anger directly because they might be afraid of losing control. Or, if Mars square Neptune, there can be an internalization and a need to escape from the situation rather than expressing anger directly. But if Mars and Aries in its pure form is going to tell you what's wrong, they're going to tell you what they're angry about, and they're going to say it very bluntly and very directly, and it can come across as being quite abrasive. So they do kind of have a quick temper, Mars and Aries people. They're quick to react. They're quick to anger, but they're quick to cool down as well. It doesn't last long, right? Their anger, as soon as it's out and it's done, and they're really able to move on. They don't harbor resentment and hold on to things in the way that some of the other Mars signs might. And so, they can shut down though if they don't get their way, and if they don't get what they want when they want it, and they feel like there's a blockage that they really truly can't. Either they'll get very angry, they'll get very frustrated, and if that doesn't work, if that doesn't give them the motivation and the ability to follow through, then they might shut down. They might become, I don't want to say depressed, but more in a depressed mood. I took a course with Lynn Coiner, who's an astrological researcher and a medical astrologer, who spoke about dysfunctional Mars and depression. I highly recommend taking this webinar. It's available online if you're interested in something like that, because it's brilliant. But one of the things that she noted that is very, very true is that, if they're not able to push through, if they're not able to get what they want, they can shut down, they can lose motivation, and, they can get into a depressed mood, not like clinical depression, but a depressed mood. And I agree with that statement. And so, they need to, in order to keep themselves feeling motivated and feeling like they can continue to engage, to have that spark of life that, keeps them going forward and keeps them initiating things, they need to be able to do things that are new, that are exciting, that are fresh. And to keep their interest when they initiate a project, they need it to constantly be fresh and to be new. And so they can't just be doing the same thing over and over again, time and time again. They need to be doing new things constantly. So switching it up and engaging in new projects, new situations. And, if they're not able to do that, they feel very restricted and very frustrated, and they'll usually just shut down and stop doing whatever it is that they're doing. And so, that's part of the reason why I do videos on so many different topics, because if I was doing the same type of video day in and day out, I wouldn't be excited about that anymore, right? But when I get to do new and exciting videos for you guys every single time and choose a new topic that's fresh and exciting for me to sort of dive into, then, I feel excited about doing these videos. But if I were doing the same video every single time, that would get kind of boring for me. And it might get boring for you guys too. So that's kind of like the nature of Mars and Aries. They need to be constantly, even if they're doing the same thing, they need to be doing it in new and exciting ways to keep that passion and that excitement going, so that way they can actually follow through. Because Mars and Aries, it's pure will, but it's pure initiation energy, right? It's the energy of starting something fresh. So that's a little bit about Mars and Aries. Mars and Taurus is very, very different in contrast to Mars and Aries. They are sort of slow to get started with projects and with ideas and with taking that action. But once they start something, they are going to see it through. They're very persistent. They're very diligent and very hardworking. So they want to be very sure about what it is that they're going to engage in, so that way they can carry it out. They can follow through. I tend to notice that Mars does best in the earth signs, because it's taking that idea, that passion, that that initiatory energy, and it's channeling it into something that's very practical and very grounded. And usually Mars in the earth signs has a better follow through than a lot of the other sign placements. And so they're very driven to follow through on their actions. So once they've decided something, that's what they're going to do. Even if it doesn't necessarily work out in their favor, they're still going to stick it out and they're going to make it work, right? And that is the nature of Mars in Taurus. What drives them is material comfort, stability, safety, security, right? So setting up a solid foundation for themselves, that type of thing. You also kind of have to look at, Mars and Taurus in the context of the signs. And same thing with any of these Mars placements, you're going to have to look at the signs and the houses, which we'll get into in, another series of videos, probably Mars and the houses, to sort of know what motivates you to take action, because it's not just the sign, it's the house as well. But they want to take action on something that is going to have lasting results and lasting value, right? Lasting material results usually, and material value. But they do tend to have really well-defined goals. They don't like to be rushed, and they like to do things at their own pace. And so when they're rushed by other people, they can feel quite frustrated and they can get a little bit angry. But they are slow to anger. And that's one of the sort of downfalls of Mars and Taurus is that, you know, they let the anger sort of build and build and build a lot of times, and they don't necessarily express it right away. They can hold it in and hold it in and hold it in, and then they'll express it way later on down in the line. So there's sort of like a delay in reaction when they feel anger. And so that can lead to these situations where they're harboring resentment, or these are the people that will bring up that thing that you did 6 years ago, that one time that you forgot about, but they did not forget about, and they've been angry about it for this entire 6 years, right? So it'll come out at some point, but it'll come out like in a completely different context, in a completely different situation, and usually there'll be a delay. So yeah, there is a delayed reaction, but there is a really intense need to express their anger verbally, right? Taurus is the throat, it's the throat chakra. And so, you know, harboring that resentment, not saying something and not telling people what's on their mind can be very detrimental. It can lead to, you know, that resentment. It can lead to a lot of frustration and irritability. And, you know, as, you know, Lynn Coiner presented in her webinar, it can lead them to sort of shut down, right? It can lead them to feel depressed or depleted in a lot of different ways. And so they won't have that motivation to keep going and keep moving forward because they're internalizing all this anger. And so they need to verbalize their anger. And, you know, they need a good cry or something. Sometimes they can ground their anger or drown their anger in, you know, things like food and, you know, indulgences of that type. But for the most part, they tend to hold it in. They tend to delay the expression of anger. But yeah, and when a Taurus is angry about something, they're going to hold on to that. So they didn't just forget about it. And then Gemini. So Gemini gets really excited about things. They need constant curiosity, constant mental stimulation. They need a change of pace to sort of keep them going. They want to do things that make sense to them on an intellectual level. So they're motivated by their curiosity. And they get really excited about starting projects. And so they tend to start a lot of different things all at once, which is different from Mars and Aries. Mars and Aries is focused on that one thing that they are starting until they've started it and it's, you know, it's off and running, and then it fizzles out, right? So that's kind of a different energy where they lose that passion and motivation once the project has been initiated. Mars and Gemini tends to initiate many projects all at once, and they can get kind of frazzled. They're all over the place. And so a lot of these projects fall by the wayside because they start the one thing and then they're really curious about this other thing. And then they have this other thing going on right there. They try to multitask and do all these things at once, but they're not honestly the best multitaskers in terms of like follow through, right? So there can be a difficulty in seeing things through. The best way to keep them motivated is to constantly have a change of pace, to be incorporating new ideas and new things and sort of mental stimulation into their day-to-day experience and into the projects that they're doing. If the project is one thing that they have to do the same thing day in and day out, they're not going to stick with it. But if they're able to incorporate new ideas, new experiences, to change it as they go, then they're going to be a little bit more motivated to follow through. They get really excited about new ideas. So that's why, you know, they'll start a lot of projects because they're motivated by that curiosity and by these new ideas, by this mental stimulation. And they need that. They need that motivation to help them to keep going. When they don't have sort of new stuff that to stimulate their excitement and to motivate them to act, they can get really bored. And so they kind of lack energy at that point. So they need that stimulation. They need to go out and do something new and to get excited about something again. And when they get angry, because Gemini rules communication and language, they tend to use quite like harsh language. They, you know, they'll debate you about all these different things. They'll play devil's advocate. They'll play the other side, and they'll know what to say to get what they want, right? Because that's sort of the Gemini in the Gemini quality of it, right? So they know what to say and they know how to express their anger in different situations to get what they want. But, you know, in general, Mars and Gemini, it's really good for curiosity, for starting a lot of new things, and, you know, for integrating a lot of different concepts into one project. And I think that would be the best utilization of that energy, right? Taking a little of this, a little of that, and a little of that, and channeling into one thing. So that way it keeps it fresh, it keeps it exciting. And so they're constantly, you know, stimulated on that mental level. And that's what's going to drive them to keep going. For Cancer and for Cancer rising, Cancers are kind of an interesting one. Mars is technically at its fall in Cancer, although I don't personally think that this is the most difficult placement for Mars. So Mars and Cancer people are motivated by their emotions. And so that's why it tends to be considered a difficult placement, because if they're not into something, they're not going to do it. If they feel bad in that moment, they're going to take action out of that feeling. But if they feel good in that moment, they're going to take action out of that feeling as well. So they're very, very highly motivated by their emotions. And as we all know, our emotions are cyclical. They change with the tides. They change with the phases of the moon. They change with our experience on a day-to-day basis. And so one day they might be really excited about what it is that they're actually engaged in. And the next day they might be like, why did I start that? Life is horrible. I feel so sad. I don't want to do this anymore. And so it can make it very difficult for them to stick with something, and they can make sort of irrational choices when it comes to the actions that they take, because the actions that they're taking are motivated by their emotional experience, by their intuitive senses, and not necessarily by what's going on in a logical, rational, sort of linear fashion. And so sometimes they can get themselves into predicaments because of that. So they really need to be emotionally connected to what it is that they're doing, and they need to sort of experience the full range of emotion surrounding what it is that they're acting on before they take that action. Otherwise, it can go a little bit south, right? It can be that they just felt really excited in that moment. They were feeling good that day. They're in a great mood. And, the next day they're not, right? So they need to make sure that they've felt it out under all the situations, all the context, all the moods. And if they're still into that idea, then they can take that action and they'll know that it's the right thing to do. And so, they can take those irrational actions. They need that emotional connection to, be switched on and to be motivated and to take that action. But they do have a hard time sticking to things just because of that emotional connection to the actions that they take. And when they express anger, it's very, again, driven by their emotions in that moment. It's not always going to be rational. It's going to be about how they feel and what, I feel this way, and it doesn't matter why they feel that way, right? And so you don't have to have a reason for it. That is how they feel, but they're going to express anger based on that. They also find it easier to express anger toward family members and loved ones than they do, toward the actual person who invoked that anger. So they'll misdirect their anger toward people who they're more comfortable expressing anger toward. And so that's kind of one of the downfalls of this Mars in Cancer. And that's another, little excerpt or idea that was given by Lynn Coiner in her course and all that. And I've used that in a lot of different charts, and it usually holds true, right? So Mars and Cancer people, they'll express anger to the people that they feel comfortable expressing anger to. And so, yeah, so that's Mars and Cancer. Mars and Leo. Mars and Leo is a nice one, actually. Mars does well in the fire signs and the earth signs because these are the masculine, or actually, no, the earth signs are not the masculine signs, the air signs are. But Mars does do well in the fire signs for the most part because the fire signs are very willful, they're very fiery, right? And Mars has that association. But in Leo, Mars does really well. It's super passionate, super playful. They're very guided by a sense of purpose, a sense of ambition. They have a feeling or a sense that what they're doing is for a larger reason. And so they have this really strong, ambitious quality. They want to do something that's significant that other people are going to see and recognize. They want to kind of leave their mark, right, through the action that they're taking. And so that's what motivates them and what drives them to actually act. And so they have a true sense of calling, like, this is my calling, this is what I'm going to do. They tend to not let life get them down. So there's not a lot that can deter a Mars and Leo person. So even when things are difficult, even when they're feeling a little bit down, they'll use their sheer force of will to pull themselves out of that and to keep moving forward. And so they're very strong-willed people. And so, yeah, so they don't tend to let life get them down. They don't let anger or, depression or anything like that usually get in the way unless Mars is afflicted in one way or another. They pull themselves up from their bootstraps. They connect again to that higher purpose, that, bigger meaning to what it is that they're doing, that sense of destiny and this connection to, like, this is what I am, this is what I'm here to do. And then they'll keep moving forward, right? So they're very optimistic. And so, yeah, so that's kind of Leo. So Mars in Virgo. Mars in Virgo, it does kind of well in Virgo. They're very logical and rational in their motivation to take action. So, they think it through. It's well thought out. It's well planned out. But they can also be very perfectionistic in the actions that they take. They're very hardworking. They're very able to achieve and accomplish their goals because they're very goal-oriented, right? And they're excellent at multitasking. They're kind of like Gemini in the sense that they'll be doing a lot of things all at once, but Virgo will see it through. The only thing that stops a Mars and Virgo person from actually accomplishing their goals is their perfectionistic side. So, if it's not perfect enough, they're not going to finish it. They're going to keep doing it and redoing it and perfecting it, and it's never going to be completely finished in their mind. And so there can be a hesitation to, say things that are complete or to turn in projects and things like that because it's not perfect and it's not living up to their standards. The other difficulty is that Mars and Virgo people, they can be kind of like micromanagers of others. And so they want things done in the right way, the perfect way, right? Which is usually their way. It's the way that they've decided in their mind is the right way to do it. And so they'll micromanage other people. They'll, demand that things are done a certain way, and sometimes they'll just do it themselves, right? And it's kind of like Mars and Aries in that sense. If it's not being done in the right way, if it's not perfect enough, they're going to do it themselves because they feel they're the only ones who can do it up to perfection and up to the right standards. And so yeah, that's kind of Mars in Virgo. Mars and Virgo people too, they tend to be constantly on the move. They need to constantly be on the move also. You're going to be hard pressed to find like a really chill Mars and Virgo person that's just like very relaxed and like slow moving and not doing a bunch of things all at once, unless maybe they have like Mars square Neptune or something else going on in their chart. But if they're not on the move, if they're not on the go, if they're not constantly, working on all these different projects and plans, then they can be very nervous and fidgety. And even when they are engaged in those actions, they can come across as sort of nervous and fidgety and anxious, but they can be more prone to anxiety than Mars and some of the other signs because Virgo is in general very prone to anxiety and nervous tension. And so that's a little bit about Mars in Virgo. Mars in Libra. So Mars in Libra always takes into account the needs of other people. And so they were taught from an early age to consider other people before taking action. And so that prevents them and hinders them sometimes from acting on their own self-interest. This is really great in the sense that they're never going to step on other people's toes or, push people aside in order to get what they want. But it can cause them to be very indecisive and wavering in their actions. So once they take action, they're constantly weighing all the options. They want to make sure that they've considered every side of the issue, even after they've already initiated it. And so sometimes they might backtrack. They might start something else instead. They might go back and forth with things. And so they want to weigh all of the alternatives. They want to make sure everything is fair and just before they take action. And that can actually lead to them not acting on their own self-interest and not getting their needs met, which is when they start to feel frustrated, irritated, angry. They can also feel angry at unfairness, right? And the unfairness of them considering other people's needs and them not considering, the Mars and Libra person's needs, right? That's one of the things. But they're quick to anger at any sort of sense of unfairness and inequality. They don't like feeling like they're stuck in the middle and stuck in between people and that type of thing. They want everything to be in balance. And so when there is too much consideration for the needs of the other, sometimes their needs aren't met. They can be frustrated. They can also tend to shut down under those situations and feel, depleted, lack of motivation because they feel like they can't get what they want or they can't do what they want because it's not the nice thing to do. It's not the right thing to do because it's not what's best for the other person, right? And so that's one of the difficulties of Mars and Libra. And so they want to also have the full picture of the situation, right? They're looking for all sides of the argument before they make their case. And that's, that's how it goes when they express their anger, but that's also how it goes when they initiate some sort of action. So they want to be able to justify their action through all of these different pieces. And this is why, this is why, this is why, these are all the parts, and this is why it's the best decision, and this is why I'm doing this. They want to ensure that it's fair, and they don't want to appear ignorant to why they're doing what they're doing. They want to be able to stand up and say, this is why, and this is how it's going to happen. And so, that's Mars and Libra. Mars in Scorpio is, I think, one of the best Mars, one of the most one of the most willful, strong, passionate placements for Mars. It's very consistent. It's very good at initiating action in the same way that Mars in Aries is, except it wants to sort of feel things out. It wants to sort of see what's going on beneath the surface, finding those hidden motivations, finding the truth. And they're actually motivated by a deeper purpose, a deeper truth, and by this obsession that takes over and causes them to become laser focused on their goals and on the action that they're taking. And because Scorpio is a fixed sign, once they do latch onto that, when they feel really passionate about it, they're going to become fixated on it. They're going to become obsessed with it, and they're going to follow through. They're going to see it through to the end because they want to get to the core of whatever it is that they're doing. And so they are on a mission. Do not break the concentration of a Mars and Scorpio person. That is, some pretty sound advice there, because they are on a mission, right? And so they don't like their concentration to be broken. They don't like people to interfere with whatever it is that they're doing. And they're not probably going to let you know what it is that they're doing. They're very different than Mars and Libra, which wants to tell you sort of why I'm doing this and justify it and all that. Mars and Scorpio does not need any justification. They're going to do it because they know it's what they need to do. And they're not going to let other people get in the way of them doing that. And so they get very angry and frustrated when somebody breaks their focus, breaks their stamina, breaks their concentration. They do have a really intense need to feel empowered, right? And so when they feel like their power's been stripped away from them, when they feel like they're not in control of the situation because of some outside force or some outside entity, they're going to feel very angry and very frustrated. And they can even become like depleted in that way when they're faced with that sort of sense of powerlessness. They need to get what they want. And if they can't, then, they get very angry. But the thing with the Mars in Scorpio placement that I've noticed, my husband has this placement, is that you would think that they'd be very quick-tempered, and some of them are. Some of them express their anger way out of control. But most of them actually tend to seclude themselves and take themselves out of the situation rather than directly expressing anger, because they fear losing control of their emotions and their anger and taking it too far, usually because they've had some sort of early experience with a parent or an authority figure or somebody in their lives, or even themselves, taking it too far, getting out of control with their anger. And so, they tend to seek solitude rather than expressing anger overtly. Sometimes they will express anger, right, after they've taken that time away and that time to themselves, but it's not going to be this explosive experience that you might think it would be, with Mars being in such a passionate sign of Scorpio, right? And so that's kind of the nature of the Mars and Scorpio person. But there are some Mars and Scorpios that will express their anger more directly and more explosively, but there's usually other stuff going on in the chart in that case. All right. And so Mars and Sagittarius. Mars in Sagittarius is motivated by the big picture, by the broader perspective, right? They're motivated on their long-term goals, their long-term plans. They're motivated by a sense of adventure. And they also... So they have a big perspective on things, and they know what they want to do, but they see it in the long term. What frustrates them is sort of these little hiccups and these little pieces to the puzzle that gets them there, right? They want to get there. They want to get to the end goal, and that's what their focus is on. So they have a harder time taking the steps and initiating those little actions that get to the broader goal and the broader perspective than other signs might. But they are very willful. They're very, very optimistic in their goal setting. They're very ambitious. All of the fire signs with Mars are quite ambitious. And so they're usually going to get to their goals. They're going to get what they need. They're going to get what they want. A lack of perspective, though, can lead to frustration or depression. They really need to have that bigger picture and that long-term goal. If they don't have some big overreaching goal or some sort of philosophical perspective on what it is that they're doing, they're not going to feel motivated to do it, and they're going to feel very frustrated. Like, why am I doing this? And they don't take orders very well. That's another thing with Mars and Sagittarius. They kind of want to have the freedom to do what they want to do. And let's see, what's the other thing? Oh, and so they're very passionate about what they believe in as well. And so a lot of arguments have sort of like this moralistic tone. So they'll get very angry they'll be angered very easily by other people who lack integrity. That's one of the things that's kind of a pet peeve. Or if they do something that doesn't make sense, or that doesn't sort of align with their moral values, they really get frustrated with a lack of follow through. So if somebody says they're going to do something, with a Mars and Aries person, and they don't actually follow through with it, Mars and Aries gets really frustrated with them. And so that's kind of one of the one of the things with Mars and Aries. They tend to use very moralistic arguments. I've described Mars and Aries a couple of times as sort of aggressively self-righteous, because they can be. It doesn't mean that they all are. I've gotten some comments and feedback where people are upset because they have their, Mars in Sagittarius. I think I just said Aries, but it's in Sagittarius. But it's true, they can be, right? They think that their belief about this situation is the right one. They're very tied to their beliefs, their morals, their values, and they'll argue them to death. And so they can be aggressively self-righteous. But for the most part, they're they act with integrity, right? That's the highest expression of Sagittarius, is this preoccupation with integrity, right? They are who they are. They say what they mean, and they do what they say. And that is the nature of Mars and Sagittarius. It's one of the nicer Mars placements. One of the things that they do need, though, is a physical outlet, right? And Mars also rules our physical activity, which is something that I didn't really get into, but it's what we need on a physical level to keep our bodies healthy, and the way that we enjoy sort of acting in a physical sense. And so they need a lot of strenuous physical activity. Otherwise, they get really restless. And they like to do things that are more adventurous, right? Like rock climbing or, bungee jumping, or something that's going to be very strenuous, but also has a sense of danger. And so that's kind of the nature of Mars in Sagittarius as well. Oops. And so Mars in Capricorn. Mars in Capricorn is one of the best placements for Mars. It's technically exalted in Mars, and this is because Mars and Capricorn people are very easily able to act in a very practical, pragmatic, logical way. They stick with what it is that they're doing. They're very hardworking and goal-oriented, and they're very ambitious, right? They are the overachievers. They're going to achieve whatever it is that they set out to achieve, and they're not going to let anything else get in their way. And so they're very achievement motivated. They're very motivated towards success, and they usually succeed in what it is that they're trying to do. They can be very angry or frustrated when it comes to blockages or perceived blockages to their success. So if something from the outside is preventing them from moving forward with the thing that they want to do, that they're driven to do, then they're going to get very angry and very frustrated. If they feel like you're getting in the way of their success, they're not going to stand for that. And so that is sort of the nature of Mars and Capricorn, and that's what angers them the most. But Mars does really well in Capricorn. They're very able to follow through with their goals. They're usually quite successful people because of this. They're not afraid to put in the hard work that the necessary effort that it takes to accomplish all that they need to accomplish in life. And so a lot of successful Mars and Capricorn people. So Mars in Aquarius, this one is a little bit different. So Mars in Aquarius has a drive to do something unique, and they want to do things their own way. They get very frustrated when there are things that are infringing and imposing upon their personal freedom and their individuality. And so too many rules and restrictions can cause them to feel very angry, very sort of caged in, and very frustrated. They need freedom to act as they please when they want to. And, so they kind of tend to change things up a lot. So they'll change their mind a lot, or they'll sort of jump into things really impulsively. But they are very motivated by sort of humanitarian pursuits, the good of all, right? They're considering not just the other, like Mars in Libra, which is the air sign that's prior to Mars in Aquarius, but they're considering the needs of the group, right? The good of all people. So they're not going to do something and take action if they feel like it's going to go against the greater good and it's going to be a detriment to humanity. So they're thinking about their actions and how it affects everybody on a global scale, or on a, even in terms of like their friend groups or social networks, that type of thing. And they're going to take into consideration other people's opinions and what other people desire and what other people need, but they're not going to necessarily let that get in the way of them doing what they want to do on an independent level. As long as it's not going to be hurting other people, right? So it's a little bit more altruistic. And so they can be very impulsive in taking action. They can change things up rather quickly, and they need a lot of mental stimulation, just like all of the air signs, and they really are driven by more scientific and more intellectual pursuits. And when they get angry, the arguments that they make kind of don't make sense a lot of times to the people on the outside. They're also really prone to fighting, for injustice and things like that, but more on a humanitarian global scale. So when something is not not good for the planet. It's not good for all the people involved. That's what's going to get them fired up and angry. And so that's Mars in Aquarius. Mars in Pisces. Mars in Pisces, in my opinion, is one of the most difficult placements for Mars, if not the most difficult placement for Mars. I know Mars is at its fall in Cancer. I feel like it should probably be Pisces because they're very prone to fantasizing instead of doing. Pisces is the most non-physical, non-tangible, non-linear of all signs. And so Mars, being such a physical, direct, action-oriented planet, doesn't do very well in Pisces. It makes it very confusing to know what action to take. They can get very caught up in the feelings, the emotions, the emotions and the impressions of other people, so they can find themselves taking action on somebody else's passion and then realizing later on that they got themselves obligated to be doing something that they don't actually want to do. It wasn't of their own volition. It was, somebody else's. And so they can kind of get themselves tricked into doing somebody else's bidding. And so that's kind of the nature of Mars and Pisces, but they are, very good at turning their visions into reality once they find the correct motivation. And so there is a proneness toward fantasizing instead of doing, but once they can break past that, once they find the right motivation, they can take their visions and very easily turn them into action because they see the whole picture before they actually act and do. But it can be difficult for them to navigate that, right? To navigate how to actually turn it into action. It's like, I know what I want to do. I see it, I feel it, but how do I actually do it? And they also tend to feel obligated to do what they feel like they have to do instead of what they want to do. So they'll sometimes play the martyr or the victim in these situations where, they feel overly obligated to do all these other things because they feel like it's what's right or what they have to do, rather than what they actually want to do. And so this can cause a lot of anger. And when they feel angry, they don't necessarily express it directly. Mars in Pisces and Mars, in square to Neptune or in a difficult aspect to Neptune is the most prone to escapism through, fantasy, through drugs, through alcohol, through spirituality and spiritual bypassing, all of these types of things. They'll escape rather than actually confronting their anger directly. So if they feel like something is unfair, if they feel like they're obligated to do things that they don't want to do, they're just going to sort of remove themselves from the situation. Lynn Coiner actually talks about Mars and Pisces or Mars square Neptune people just getting really tired instead of expressing anger, so like going to sleep. I don't know if anybody's experienced that. I haven't found that one for myself with Mars in square to Neptune in my chart, but it's possible, right? It's possible. There's definitely a proneness to escapism. This is one of Mars and Pisces and Mars square Neptune is very highly associated to alcoholism and drug abuse and things like that, because they'll internalize their anger. They'll internalize this sense of frustration, this sense of things being unfair. They'll shut down and they'll escape instead of actually expressing their anger. And so there's a need to express their anger, right? So there's a need to learn to express their anger appropriately and to use that anger as a motivation and a driving force to actually get them to take action. And when they do take action and when they do act out their fantasies and act on their visions, they're motivated by usually a deep sense of compassion and a deep sort of spiritual, meaning and purpose to what it is they're doing. So they're going to act very compassionately, very lovingly. They have they have a bigger reason for what it is they're doing. And so they're definitely not a sign that's going to step on other people's toes or push people out of the way. They're going to be acting out of a place of love, compassion, and sort of a spiritual understanding that we're all connected, right? And so they don't want to do something to hurt somebody else because that's going to hurt them in return. So they're very aware of that concept as well. And so, so that's Mars and Pisces. So Mars and Pisces can be quite wonderful, but it's very difficult to navigate. And so that's kind of why I spent a lot of time focusing on Mars and Pisces, because I think people with Mars and Pisces need to understand a little bit more about, what's going on there. So that's all 12 signs. So I hope that you guys found this video helpful. I will be back in a couple of weeks with my next video, and I hope to see you then. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful week. Bye.